Okay, so we're here in Brussels, not in the European Parliament today. We're in a wonderful restaurant, Costa d'Amalfi, Roostevin, by the way. Best Italian restaurant in Brussels. Very lucky to be here with Benedict Rogers. Benedict Rogers is very famous or very well known in British political circles and indeed global political circles as a major critic of communist China. He's also the author of this book, China Nexus. We were very privileged recently to host the launch of the book in Brussels. Benedict, great to have you here with us. You've been today at a conference at the Press Club in Brussels, where we've been discussing a lot about China and its oppression of religion, per se, particularly of particular religious groups. Would you like to basically give us an idea of what was discussed?
Yeah, well, firstly, it's great to be with you and great to be in Brussels. It was a really important and quite wide-ranging conference. I had the privilege of speaking primarily about the unravelling, the dismantling of freedom in Hong Kong, which has really gone from being one of Asia's most open cities to one of its most repressive police states. But we had Sir Geoffrey Nice, KC, who had once been the prosecutor of Slobodan Milosevic, and he was speaking about the two tribunals that he had led on the genocide of the Uyghurs and the persecution of Falun Gong and forced organ harvesting. And then we had, of course, the Taiwanese ambassador. Officially, he's not ambassador, but we should all call him that because we should stand with Taiwan. And discussion around China's influence at the UN. So it was really that range of issues: Hong Kong, Taiwan, the Uyghurs, Falun Gong. Of course, there was another speaker on religious freedom in China, particularly the situation for Christians and for religious groups that are banned in China. Possibly the one issue we didn't get into, which maybe for another day, was Tibet. But still, it was a very comprehensive discussion.
As we're here in Brussels, and we're actually just really in the shadow of the European Commission, which is the major executive, the decision-making centre actually in the EU. How do you feel that the EU is treating China? Do you believe that maybe because of its economic clout, that the EU is treating China with kid gloves?
Yeah, I think the EU is still doing exactly that. I think opinion has started to shift a little bit, and I did have in the last few days some very good meetings with both the Commission and the European External Action Service, where I did feel there were people who are taking these issues seriously, but nevertheless there is still, given the scale of the human rights crisis across China and the scale of the challenge China poses to our own freedoms, the EU, and not only the EU, the West as a whole is still too soft.
You mentioned different religions. Is China picking on any one particular religion any more than the other? We're aware of the treatment of the Uyghurs, who are of course a Muslim, but also we heard at the conference about the attitudes towards the Catholic Church, Christianity in general. Is it just because Chinese are communist, therefore they are atheist? Is it all religion that they have a problem with, or is there any one that they may see as a threat?
I would say it is all religion, and the Communist Party has always been opposed to religion. They've always been opposed to any belief or idea that they feel challenges loyalty to communism. But I think among the religions in China that are most persecuted are, as you say, the Uyghurs and other Muslims, definitely Christians, Tibetan Buddhists, and there's a combination there of both the political struggle of Tibetans as well as the spiritual beliefs of Tibetan Buddhists, and Falun Gong. So it is across the spectrum.
If you were able to maybe make one policy suggestion towards to the European Commission, and you were assured that that would actually be acted upon, what would be the one thing? What would be the one priority that you would put before the Commission and say, this is what we need you to do now?
I think the Commission has talked a bit, and Ursula von der Leyen has talked a bit about de-risking the trading relationship with China. That's a good starting point, but it needs to go much, much further. And I think if there's one action that they should take, I mean, this is probably not very likely anytime soon, but we must keep pushing them for it, is to impose tough, targeted sanctions, not on China as a whole, but on individuals and Chinese enterprises that are facilitating the repression, companies that are providing the surveillance equipment, and individuals that are responsible for whether it's the genocide of the Uyghurs or the dismantling of Hong Kong's freedoms. I think for there to be no consequences for those crimes, which Sir Geoffrey Nice has recognised as a genocide of crimes against humanity, if there are no consequences, then the Chinese regime is just going to continue its repression with impunity. So I think the EU needs to look seriously at sanctioning Chinese officials and entities.
Sanctions, as we've seen, particularly with Russia in the current, in the context of the war in Ukraine, are selectively imposed and selectively policed. I think that any journalist, any politician would be able to reel off a number of areas in which the sanctions are simply ignored with impunity, or they're basically they're dealt with by trading through back doors. How do you feel about that? Okay, so you're suggesting there should be more sanctions, but should we not also be really imposing those sanctions, not just talking about them?
Oh, absolutely. I think enforcing sanctions, policing them, making sure that they mean something is really important.
Is there any one particular area that you feel would hit China hard if sanctions were to be imposed and enforced strictly?
I think sanctioning the major Chinese companies that are still big players on the world stage, whether it's Huawei, Hikvision, companies that are really responsible for building China's surveillance state, that I think is where I would start at least.
Do you think also that individuals should understand, most people have no influence over politics other than voting. And we know even there, voter turnouts are quite low. It'll be interesting to see what happens this year, where more than half the world is going to elections. But we all talk about, sanctioning. We talk about how evil this child labour is, and it should be stopped. And we then carry these around with us, made in China, made probably by child labour. So maybe we ourselves are actually being somewhat hypocritical. We're calling for sanctions to be imposed, to be enforced, and then we're using iPhones.
Yeah. Well, I think a key step we should be doing much more on alongside sanctions is diversifying our supply chains and trying to manufacture the consumer goods that we all use in places that don't use either child labour or slave labour in general.
Thank you very much for coming and talking to us, and for the conference, which we followed avidly, and we'll be actually posting, and anybody reading this article, look down below, you will see the full conference. It was a little over 2 hours actually, a great deal covered, many different people presenting their opinions, their views, and I think that this has been an event today that will be ruffling some feathers in Beijing. I think that most of the things you say actually do ruffle feathers in Beijing, and you should be very proud of that. And we're very proud to have you with us today. Thank you very much for your time. We look forward to seeing you again in Brussels as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.